So today we've got Becky Corbett on the podcast, and Becky is a holistic registered nurse with a graduate diploma in psychology, and she's based in Brisbane, Australia. And Becky calls herself the gentle living nurse, and she says that gentle living supported her to nurture her nervous system through combining elements of science, spirituality, and intuition. And her mission is to support other highly sensitive people, particularly within the healthcare, healing or other creative arts, to heal from chronic anxiety and stress, and to restore a state of natural inner calm, balance, and well-being through creating their own gentle living journeys. Welcome to the Heart Connection podcast, Becky. So good to have you here.
Oh, hello, Pavlina, and thank you for having me, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. It's really good to be here with you. It's evening here, and I guess it's day for you. We're on opposite sides of the world.
Yes, I'm in Prague, so I think we've got like a 8-hour difference, 10-hour difference, something like that. So
Yes,
morning here, but it's amazing how we can connect, and we actually connected through a women's mastermind, even though we live on the other side of the world, and we've been in touch ever since. And I've been a guest on your podcast, so
yes, that was fun.
That's been really lovely. So thank you for being here with me on the Heart Connection podcast, and I'm so excited for our conversation.
Oh, me too. Thank you.
So to start, I would love for you to share your story with the listeners, your journey. How did you become the gentle living nurse? What's the reason behind it? Why gentle living? Tell us all about it, please.
Yes. Where do I start? Well, I would like to begin by acknowledging the country on which I'm on. So I'm in Australia, but something that a lot of us do here in Australia is we like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. So I am living and working on Turrbal country at the moment. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So, okay, where do I start? Yes, so hello everyone. My name's Becky, as per Pavlina's introduction. So I've been a registered nurse for about 12 years now. I've worked across the hospital system. I've worked in paediatrics with children. I've worked in mental health, and I've had a couple of burnouts as well, which probably, I know that you've experienced burnout, Pavlina, and I know probably a lot of your listeners have experienced burnout to one degree or another as well. It does affect those of us who are quite sensitive, but even if you don't identify as being sensitive, it is a big problem for a lot of people in this modern day age. So yes, having worked in the hospital healthcare system as a nurse, I was originally drawn to the profession through a love of learning and healthcare and improving people's health. And I found working in the healthcare system really burnt me out because, well, especially in the Western healthcare model, it's very much directional, as in, you're the expert, you're the nurse, or you're the doctor. You have to tell people what to do. They don't have much choice, really. It's not very empowering. And I found that to be quite draining, because you go onto a shift or you start working with people and you're expected to dish out sort of one-size-fits-all approaches for people. And that became really, really exhausting. It was purely sort of looked at in a physical, scientific viewpoint. And I am a science nerd. I love science, and it's very much a part of the work that I do still now. But it was really lacking a lot of other things. So there was lacking sort of emotional support for patients, also emotional support for nurses. A lot of nurses burn out. The spirituality side of things was completely ignored. And I experienced burnout from not only that side of things, but also working so many shifts, doing odd hours, working in an environment which was really sensory overload. You know, there's alarms going off, there's bells going, the lights are really overwhelming, the smells are terrible, all those types of things. And I suppose I've always been quite a sensitive person, and reflecting back now, looking at my childhood, I was always quite an anxious child, and I was very sensitive to my surroundings. And I suppose as I grew up in a loving family and a loving household, but I suppose when you grow up sensitive, you sort of feel like you're a little bit different, and you sort of feel as though you're a bit strange because you're sort of bothered by things that other people don't seem to be bothered by. And that was certainly the case for me in the healthcare system. So after a couple of burnouts within the healthcare system, and while I was on an overseas trip back in when was it? Around the end of 2018, I was in India, and I had a really terrible panic attack while I was over there. And it sort of just hit home for me, I suppose. I just realized, oh gosh, my life is a mess at the moment. I was doing all the wrong things for my health. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was drinking a lot of alcohol to deal with the stress. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't paying much attention to my relationships. I had no boundaries. I wasn't saying no to extra shifts. I was just saying yes to everything and just completely depleting myself. And so I got home from that trip and I decided, right, I need to do some serious work here. I need to address myself holistically, really take care of my body, my mind, and my spirit again. And shortly after that, I quit the job that I was in at that time to work in something that was a little less high stress for me, and to really address my nervous system health. So I really took care of my nervous system by doing all the things that really nourished me. So I really took exercise seriously. I used to hate exercise in the past, but I found found Pilates, which I really enjoyed, and I was walking and eating properly and doing the meditation, and self-care, I guess, isn't always glamorous. It's doing some things that you don't want to do, or things that are a bit uncomfortable. And that's sort of around the time that I started to develop my gentle living philosophy. So I originally developed it for myself and my own healing journey, having been a chronically anxious person. And over time, I thought, this is something that I want to share with other people. This is something that I think other people would really benefit from, because I know that burnout and anxiety is a big problem for a lot of people. And so I created my own business, and now I support, long story short, I support other highly sensitive people, and I'll explain what that is as well.
That was my next question.
Yes. So I support highly sensitives to take care of their nervous system so that they can flourish and thrive in the world. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, maybe for those of our listeners who don't know what a highly sensitive person is, would you mind explaining a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the work has been pioneered by a researcher and therapist based in the United States, Dr. Elaine Aron. So she's done a lot of research, and she discovered this trait of high sensitivity. So high sensitivity is a trait that we're born with. It's innate. It's about 20% of us roughly are born with this trait. So it's not, I just want to emphasize, it's not a disorder. It's not a mental illness. It's not a flaw. It simply means that we've been born with a more sensitive nervous system, which means we're more perceptive to the environment around us. So we can become overwhelmed quite easily, and we do live in quite a noisy world. And a world that's sort of, there's so many sights and sounds and smells and things going on, and people to interact with, and especially in the modern day world, social media, and, we're all working remotely a lot more these days as well. So all of these things are quite overwhelming, or can be overwhelming to the highly sensitive person. So as a highly sensitive person, the way I like to see it is that we experience the world in technicolor. So things like, we're very perceptive to energies in the environment. we're very perceptive to the sensory stuff like the sounds and smells and sights. We've got a very deep inner world. So we have a very rich imagination, which makes us quite creative. We're very intuitive as well. So we can really detect subtleties within the environment and sort of, I guess, yeah, a lot of highly sensitive people say that they can walk into a room and really feel the energy. You can sort of tell whether there's been a fight or whether there's been a bit of unsettle within the room or whether it's a harmonious environment. And a lot of us aren't necessarily consciously aware of it. We just think that that's normal for everyone, but it's actually not. We're very deep sensors. So some signs that you might be highly sensitive. And the other thing I just want to touch on too is, as I think there's a lot of negativity around the word sensitive. So a lot of people that I have worked with or even incidentally had conversations with about being highly sensitive sort of think that it's an abnormality or there's something wrong with being sensitive, but it's not. It's just you're sensitive to the environment. So as a highly sensitive person, you value deep relationships. So we don't really like fakeness or inauthenticity. We really value that deep, meaningful connection. I know for myself, I get quite drained with small talk. I prefer to have deep conversations with people.
Me too.
And I know you do too.
Yeah.
We seek truth and meaning. So again, it's coming to that authenticity. We don't like to sort of skim on the surface. We like to understand the truth or the depth of a situation. We're often very moved by beauty or the arts. You might have found yourself being quite maybe crying by beautiful art or by some joyous occasion or music or whatever it may be. Those types of things really touch you. You also know how to make others feel at ease, because we're very good at detecting energy in an environment. We're very good at detecting whether someone's uncomfortable or if they're upset, and so we know how to navigate that situation and make people feel at ease. And the other gift that we hold too is that we're very intuitive. So again, coming back to being able to detect those subtleties, we do have quite deep intuition, but sometimes that is masked by anxiety, because if our nervous systems are overwhelmed, we're not taking care of ourselves, we do feel quite anxious, and that can kind of dampen down the intuition that we've got access to. So that in a nutshell is high sensitivity. So I hope that makes sense, and I'm sure, and I'm suspecting that probably the majority of your listeners listening to this are probably sensitive.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that. I mean, I don't like to put labels on things, so I don't, although I am quite sensitive, I've never seen myself as a highly sensitive person, but I have a feeling that most of us who are intuitive, who are maybe identifying as light workers or star seeds or healers, that most of us are highly sensitive. And I actually like to see this as a superpower rather than a flaw or something negative, because we are highly intuitive. We are, like you said, we can put people at ease. We can feel into people's emotions and all these other things. We are highly creative. And although it can be overwhelming at times, it's so important to take care of ourselves so we can help others as well. So maybe would you mind talking about the self-care part? What would you recommend someone who is highly sensitive, or I've been told so many times I'm too sensitive. So if that's true for some of the listeners, how can they take care of themselves, so they are not so overwhelmed or anxious? What would you say are some tips?
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I know I'm very much one for not labeling things too much. And I suppose it depends where you sort of sit. Like some people find it validating to name what they're going through, and other people like to not have sort of a name to something or not to categorize themselves. But basically, if we're just thinking of it more so as a trait, and the way that we sort of navigate the world is just a little bit differently. And yes, we certainly need to address our self-care a little bit differently too, to what the non-highly sensitive person does. And that's not to say that we're better than or we're less than the non-highly sensitive person. It's just different. It's just the way that we approach the world. And yes, I've, a lot of the time, I think that's where a lot of the negative perceptions around being highly sensitive come from, because it's almost like an insult. Oh, you're too sensitive, toughen up. Why are you getting so upset about that? You're overreacting.
Yeah, you're too emotional.
Yes, all of those things. So I think if we just own it, we're like, yeah, I am sensitive, and that's fine. It's just the way I navigate the world. But yes, self-care. So I found, in my own experience, and also with the work that I do to support highly sensitive people, is that our focus really needs to be on nurturing the nervous system, taking care of our nervous system, because it is scientifically, and studies have shown this as well, that our nervous system, so if we think of the nervous system being the brain, our nerves, the way that we take in information from the environment, because that is so sensitive, we need to make sure that we're doing the things to keep it nice and calm and at a nice baseline. So I think a big thing, and especially in the modern day world, is because we've got so much stimulation coming in from all different types of sources. There's technology, there's media, there's social media, there's noises happening around us. I know my neighbours, they'll be hammering away or sawing at something or doing the lawns, and I find that to be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So I need to make sure that I'm taking care of the nervous system. And the way that we can do that is just by being a bit more mindful of our environments. So if you know that, and again, we've all got differing degrees of what we can tolerate when it comes to, say, noise or sound or smell or pain. But if we're able to create an environment for us that's really nurturing, that is one of the most important things, I think, for the highly sensitive person. It's important for everyone, but especially for the highly sensitive person. So looking at your environment, are you living somewhere that's noisy? You might not be able to avoid that, but what can you put in your environment to make it a little bit more supportive to your nervous system? Can you maybe putting sound blocks, or can you put headphones in and listen to some nice soothing music? What can you actually do to decrease that intake? The other thing is also reducing our intake to media. That's a huge one. So, with everything that's happening in the news at the moment, it's very important to stay informed with everything that's happening, but also there comes a point that you can only take in too much, and then you're internalizing it. And oftentimes the brain can't actually tell whether something we're watching is something that we're personally experiencing, or whether it's separate to us. So if you're taking in that a lot of the time, that's going to be overwhelming for you. The other thing that's really, really important for the highly sensitive person is boundaries. I think we do struggle a lot with boundaries. We are drawn to healthcare, healing, helping, light work sort of professions, and so we want to make a difference. We want to support other people, but then we often think that means we have to give everything to other people, and then we sort of neglect ourselves. So it's about saying no to things that aren't serving us or that are draining us. So be really mindful of the people that you're surrounding yourself with as well, whether that be friends, family, the clients you choose to work with, the people in your workspace. And actually going back to news intake as well, I think Tim Ferriss, I'm not sure, he didn't talk about this in relation to the highly sensitive person, but I think he's got a concept along the lines of low information diet. Have you heard of that? Yeah.
I think I might have. Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that. But I'm
yeah.
not sure if what was it Tim Ferriss? I don't know, but yeah, I might have heard
I think
about it.
so. Yes, I think I read it in the 4 hour work week, but pretty much to maintain your sanity and your
Mm,
creativity, making sure that you're not consuming too much information, which is draining
mm,
to you. So that can be even conversations that you're having with other people. If you know that a certain person or a certain situation drains you, try to limit the intake of that as well. And on the flip side, we are sensitive to negative stimuli, I suppose, in our environment, but we're also very sensitive to the positive stimulus.
mm,
So we are very much perceptive to things like touch or massage, the things that invigorate the senses. So things like smell, so aromatherapy can be really therapeutic. Having nice lighting, being in touch with nature is
mm.
super, super soothing for the highly sensitive
Yes.
person. Meditation, just sitting in stillness, moving our bodies, all of those things are very, very powerful. They're underrated, but super powerful. So I think I think that sort of summarizes it. I think as a highly sensitive person, you know intuitively what really suits you. I
Mm,
know for myself, I need a lot of quiet time. I'm very much an introvert, but side note to that, uh, you can be an extrovert and you can be a highly
yeah.
sensitive person as well. They're completely different. So you can be an
Mm,
extrovert, but you can
mm,
also be very sensitive to your environment. So I need, both as a highly sensitive and as an introvert, I need lots of quiet time, lots of solitude, soft music. I know that if I've spoken with a lot of clients in a day, although I love my work, I need to go and then have some time out afterwards to just close my eyes,
mm.
focus inwards again, take care of myself, and just to reduce the stimulation that's happened within my nervous system, because we do take on a lot of other people's pain or issues, or even other people's joy. Other people's happiness is great, but that can be overwhelming for us a little bit sometimes
Mm.
too. So taking care of your own energy in those ways.
Yeah, definitely. I agree so much with all you've said. And although I'm probably not as introverted as you are, I'm somewhere in between. Like I feel like sometimes I feel more extroverted, sometimes a bit more
Mm,
introverted, but I definitely need time for myself. Although I like to
mm,
be amongst people who are, especially those who are aligned with my energy, but still I need time for
mm,
myself. And yeah, nature is a big one for me. I definitely need lots of time in nature to decompress and connect to the earth, and yeah,
mm.
get over the sensory overload. And yeah, sometimes just really staying quiet and closing my eyes and not receiving
Mm.
anything. Yeah,
Yes.
or taking a few deep breaths, like so
Yes.
many things ways you can do that. But when actually when someone's already experiencing burnout or going through burnout and this like
Mm.
overload, overwhelm, what can they do then? How can they heal it, or how can they, overcome this?
Yeah, it's so tricky because I think burnout is so rife at the moment, and especially since the pandemic, there seems to be
Mm,
real significant, crazy levels of burnout. It's something that's really common. When I speak about my experience about burnout with other people, I think about 9 people out of 10 would have some sort of an experience with burnout as well. So I think it's very difficult, but I think we need to perhaps address it at the root, at the source of the
mm-hmm.
burnout, because
Always.
we might, yes, it's the same with anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think, yes, I found, especially in one of the jobs that I was working, when I was working in mental health, um, I was working with lovely people, but I think there was a lot of band-aid solutions. And what I mean by that is that you'd go to work, you'd have all this stress, you'd be carrying other people's trauma. And then the band-aid solution to that would be a bit of self-care. So it would be, okay, we'll go home, have a day off, have a bath, and you'd feel temporarily better. But then you'd
Mm,
go back and you'd do it, you'd be experiencing it again. So it almost cancelled out. whatever self-care that you were doing. So I think one of the things that was really paramount for me was to really look at the environment that I was working in, and to just be honest with myself about, is this right for me? And it wasn't. And I think for a lot of people, it's just about being honest about the environment that they're working in. So it might be the job itself that people enjoy, but it may be that they're working with, say, toxic colleagues, or they're working overtime. And also, it doesn't, to experience burnout, you don't need to necessarily be working long hours either. I think people think, oh, if you're burnt out, it means you have been working 15 hours a day, 6 days a week. You can still be working 9 till 5 or even less and still be experiencing burnout. And a lot of the time, I think burnout is, or the symptoms of burnout are normalized as just being stress. So the symptoms of burnout are things like just being so fatigued and lethargic despite having had lots of rest. No matter how much sleep you get, you're still exhausted. You might be feeling quite cynical. You might be feeling quite anxious, quite depressed, really detached from your work, sort of feeling like as though nothing is really bringing you joy. And so we need to look at what is actually causing that. And for myself, I know people that I've worked with too, it's not until you actually walk away from that situation and sort of think to yourself, what do I need to thrive? What sort of environment do I need to thrive? Is that, working certain hours? I know that shift work didn't work for me. It made me feel very, very anxious and constantly overwhelmed. And it's almost as though, if you've experienced a burnout, and you can probably relate to this, Pavlina, it's almost as though your soul is dying in a way. Yeah. That's what it felt like for me. Your soul is just like nothing is really bringing you joy. And so I think it's about, being honest about your values as well. So although I love working with people, and a lot of people that are working in helping, healing, healthcare professions love working with people, we can still take on a bit too much of their stuff and then become a bit overwhelmed. So it goes back to implementing those boundaries. I know for myself, I needed more of a harmonious environment. I mentioned earlier about working in a hospital where there's sight, sound, smells, too much going on. Wasn't for me. I think hospitals are the worst places for healing, to be honest. They're meant to be places where we go to heal and feel better, but they're set up so badly. I needed an environment that was more quiet, where I could work autonomously, where, and as an introvert, working more for myself or within a small team. Or if you're an extrovert, you might sort of thrive working with a supportive, uplifting team, or at least if you're working by yourself, trying to make connections with people that you sort of vibe with as well. So I think the key to, and there's no one solution, there's no one answer, unfortunately, but I think the key is to identify what is it that actually makes you thrive, what do you actually need, and working that way.
Yeah, and one other thing maybe I'd like to mention is, like, I experienced burnout when I was still employed, but then when I transitioned into like self-employment and started my own business full time, I experienced burnout as well, because I was putting so much pressure on myself. I was trying to help everyone. That was at the beginning of COVID, and I wasn't taking care of myself, but I was trying to help everyone else. So I think that's important to mention as well, that it doesn't always have to be other environments, but if you not address what's behind it within yourself, what is, because for me, it was a lot of the things that were connected to it was me not feeling good enough and trying to prove myself and all these things. So sometimes it can be really like deep wounds that you haven't healed from childhood, or from the past, and that can cause burnout or other health issues as well. So really, like you said,
Absolutely.
we have to really go to the root and address the root causes and heal them and release them. And yeah, it's I had to I had to learn the lesson the hard way, and that's something I'm still working on. And it's like they say, and when you're on a plane, you have to put on your mask first before you can help
Yes,
anyone
yes.
else. So, and I
Yes, so
think
true.
a lot of the listeners here are coaches, healers themselves. So that's definitely something I think it's important, that because most of us are highly sensitive, that we need to really take care of ourselves, even when we are self-employed, or even more so, I would say.
Oh, totally. Yes. And that people pleasing stuff is huge, I think, for highly sensitive people. And it does stem a lot from what we've experienced as children, or from our early years, or the programming, the messaging that we've taken in. Yes, I think it's a huge, huge thing. And especially when you're in your own business, you're trying to prove yourself, maybe whether it's unconsciously, or you're trying to,
Yeah.
you probably say yes to things a bit too much, and that in itself can burn you out as well. So I think that's something that we need to be mindful of. And actually, the work that you do, Pavlina, I know that you work with women to support them with chronic health issues. It's interesting because there's such a strong connection between people pleasing and being quite sensitive and experiencing chronic health issues. Pain is a big one that I come across with people that I work with.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, pain and inflammation is huge. And often, if we are addressing the root cause of that, which is a lot of the time people pleasing and saying no to ourselves, but saying yes. So yeah, saying yes too much to other people, but no to ourselves. It shows up in the body, and the body wants to tell us, hey, there's something going on here. You're not taking care of me. So I'm going to tell you I've got pain, I've got inflammation. You need to slow down, you need to pay attention to me. It's almost like this inner child screaming out, hey, take care of me.
Yeah, and the body's always talking to you, always. Yeah, there's so many messages I receive almost on a daily basis from my body. And the moment I'm not listening, the moment I'm not following my guidance, my intuition, it will show up physically, either as pain
Yes.
or anything else. It can be like an eczema flare up, or it can be any allergies, anything else, a headache. Yeah.
Just something to get your attention.
Yeah. So something else I'd like to talk about, you mentioned the sensory overload and information overload. And I know that you made a decision to leave social media as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, which I think these days is a really big one, because we are taught that we need social media. And I know I have this really difficult relationship with social media, and I was so excited to talk to you about this, because I know, especially as highly sensitives, intuitives, it's really, there's so much information, so much energy, and it can be so draining to trying to be active all the time and all of these things. And we all know that social media, the apps are created to be addictive as well. So even though we don't like to go on there, at least me, I still feel the urge to grab my phone all the time and check if there's any new messages, likes, or what's going on, what other people are doing. Or sometimes I'm just bored, and that's the first thing I tend to do. So I would like you, if you can share your journey with social media and what led you to actually leaving social media. I would love to hear all about it.
Yes, I'm excited to talk about this as well. I've been umming and ahhing about leaving social media for quite a while, and I made the decision, when was it? December 2020. So it's been a few months now that I've been off social media. And for a range of different reasons. And, I was sort of saying before about how it's important for us highly sensitive people to recognize what environments we really need to thrive. Social media was a very big part of my business, but it was starting to just become draining for me. It was starting to become, it felt really inauthentic. And I'm just speaking to my experience as well. I know that there's a lot of benefits as well that people do get from social media, and I'm certainly not slogging social media altogether. I know that it can be a really helpful platform. But just speaking to my experience and being highly sensitive, it was sort of just draining my energy. And I started to think, oh gosh, if Instagram, because Instagram was my main platform for my business, if Instagram was a physical place, I don't think I'd want to go there. It would be too overwhelming. Imagine stepping into a real life Instagram where there's all these lights and people and noises and 5-second reels and things going off. That for me would be quite overwhelming. So I started off by implementing some boundaries. I've always been very particular around who I follow. I tried to sort of limit my time on there as well. But I just started to find it was becoming more and more inauthentic. And I think to many of us highly sensitives are very big on ethics. We're very big on treating people well and having good morals and those types of things. And the more I sort of looked into social media and understood the background of it, the more I thought, I just didn't feel like it was the right place for my business. And that was just sort of, my decision at that time. And so I experimented by just stepping away for a month just to see how I felt and just to see whether, the world came crashing down if I left social media, which it didn't, of course. And I just found that month away from social media, I was rewiring my brain, because I still had we've all got that addiction, I suppose, because it's like rewiring the brain, because yes, it's designed so that we get those dopamine hits every time we get some sort of a notification or something. It's wiring us to keep checking our phones. And that was just making me feel yuck, to be honest. And so I stepped away, and it was really hard to start with to not pick up my phone. I thought, oh gosh, I've got to do something else now. But then that energy that I was putting into social media, checking to make sure I was engaging, or making sure people were liking my stuff, or making sure that people were connecting with what I was saying, all that energy then started to go into the more meaningful stuff for me. So it went into things like my podcast and being able to make the connections on my podcast. I had more energy for clients, to work with clients. I had more energy for writing. I had just a clearer mind, more creativity. All of that energy, which was sort of just being given in little dribs and drabs to social media, was now being dedicated to other things that were holding more meaning for me. And it's really important, and I think for you as well, and for a lot of us business owners, is we want to create content that makes a difference and connects and makes meaning. And I felt like I was able to do that more authentically, stepping away from social media. And I started just researching other business owners that had similar businesses to myself that didn't use social media. And the more I learned, social media is a relatively new invention compared to a lot of other things. It's been around since, properly, I guess, maybe around the mid-2000s or so, which is not that great deal of time. And you think businesses have existed and thrived before social media ever existed.
Yeah, we tend to forget, I feel.
Yes. It's crazy, isn't it? And we sort of think I felt like I was being pulled into this whole delusion that you have to have social media to have a successful business. And I think social media thrives off that belief that we hold, because then we're showing up and where they're capturing our attention and they're selling our attention to advertisers, and all that kind of stuff was just didn't sit right with me. And then, they changed with algorithms and things like that. I found I wasn't reaching as many people as I used to because I wasn't getting on video, and I wasn't doing reels, and I wasn't doing lives and all these things that you need to do, which is just draining for me, not only as a highly sensitive, but as an introvert. I find it draining to be on camera and to be doing all this stuff all the time. So basically, I started to see social media for myself as sort of like junk food for my mind. I thought, too much junk food, give it a break. And I've been off ever since. And it's not made a difference. If anything, it's made a positive impact to my business because I've got more energy to dedicate to my business and to the platforms that I own, because social media, we don't own those platforms. Those social media owns our content when we put it on there. But when you create a podcast or you've got your website, you own that content. And so I wanted to be in charge of my content, I suppose, rather than giving it over to social media. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering, though, if someone doesn't want to leave social media, because for me it's a form of connection as well. I remember when I lived in New Zealand, or even now when I have friends in other parts of the world, so social media, Facebook, Instagram is a way to connect to my friends, to my community as well. But yeah, the connection with my friends is usually because it's the form of communication for me and for a lot of people. So I feel like I'm not ready to leave social media completely, but I've changed my approach as well. I don't follow the advice of like marketing experts or whatever. I just post when it feels aligning, when it feels good, and when I actually feel I have something to share. But I still, and I'm sure so many other people have, like I shared, like the tendency to go on way more often than I'd like to. Would you maybe have any tips how we can consciously limit social media use, how we can approach it more consciously and take control rather than let it control us?
Yeah, such a good question, because yes, like I said earlier, social media can be a really helpful platform for a lot of people. And I know I've certainly made some really great connections through social media, which I'm so grateful for, which I wouldn't have made otherwise. So I think with anything, it's the way that you consume it, which is most important. So I mentioned before about junk food. It's fine to have junk food sometimes, sometimes we feel like it, as long as we're being more mindful about it. Too much of anything, I don't think, is a good thing. But yes, I do believe that there's ways to be more conscious of our consumption of social media and to be more mindful and to use it as a tool to serve us. And I think the number one thing is the boundaries, really, to sort of set boundaries for ourselves, maybe even look at ourselves as children in a way. What if it was a child going into social media, what rules would you have for them? It might be things like, well, one, being really particular on who you follow. So if you're finding that there's accounts that might trigger you a little bit or make you feel bad about yourself, or just inciting those negative feelings for yourself, it might be a family member or a friend, you can sort of mute that person, I suppose. You don't need to necessarily unfollow them, but you can just make sure that you're not actually being exposed to the content that they're posting, or you can unfollow them, which I would suggest as well. Having time boundaries as well. So making sure that, if you want to go on social media, totally fine, but maybe putting time limits on it. So it could be limiting it to just in the morning, a set time in the morning, or in the afternoon, or in the evening, or it could be putting a timer on. I know that Instagram has a timer which will remind you, hey, you've been on for whatever, 10 minutes now. It's very easy to ignore those timers, but it's one tool. It's a reminder. So yeah, time boundaries. If that's difficult though, something that I have found helpful, because I've got my personal Instagram account, which is just for my friends and family. So I rarely
Mm,
go on that. I rarely post on it. I don't have my business Instagram anymore, but I've got my personal one just for the reasons that you said. It's
mm,
nice to be able to have those connections. One thing that I find that I do is I just delete the app altogether. And then
mm,
if I want to go on into Instagram, I have to actually download the app, and then you have to think about, okay, it gives you a bit of a time buffer to think, do I really want to go
mm,
on? Then I have to download it. I have to put my password back in, just making it a little bit more difficult for yourself. So you're thinking about
mm,
it before getting on. Or the other thing I was doing too was just not having the app at all on my phone, but only accessing it on desktop. So
mm,
and open up my laptop, log in, go through. And then I think on your desktop as well, it's easier to have those time limits because you don't necessarily want to sit in front of your laptop and just scroll. It's easier to do it on
mm.
your phone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those types of things can be helpful, and just going in with intention and just being
Mm,
mindful that it is very difficult to exercise self-control, because yes, they're designed to stimulate certain parts of the brain, and there's all these
mm,
studies that show that when we go onto social media, it does trigger the same parts of the brain that get that light up when we're gambling, for instance, or winning money or taking drugs or
mm,
those types of things as well. So just being mindful that we don't always have control. You can't always control it. It's part of the way that we're wired. So putting in those measures in place can help, I think.
mm.
What do you find is helpful for you?
Well, I actually, because I was struggling with this quite a lot, like not wanting to go on social media, and I felt myself like I shared grabbing my phone all the time. And then I asked my inner voice about it, what would be helpful, or
Mm.
what I can do instead. And my inner voice told me, because I go there to for the connection, and to,
Yeah.
and then my inner voice said, instead to go grab your phone, go on social media, connect with us, take a breath. And if you seek connection, if you seek answers, just close your eyes, take a deep breath and connect with us, and you will get the answers there instead of going on social
Mm.
media. And I try to practice that. I'm not perfect. I'm not doing like, I don't do it all the time, but it's been really helpful that way. And even when I find myself grabbing the phone, when I notice it, then sometimes I just take a deep breath and put the phone down again. And that's been quite helpful.
Yeah.
And what I mentioned before as well, not pushing myself to post 5 times a week or whatever the suggestion is from the experts. I don't even follow like expert advice or anything like that, but just posting when it feels aligning. And yeah, I don't follow any advice. I usually I just follow my inner guidance usually, and that's been
Mm.
really helpful for me. And it's a work in progress, definitely. And
Mm.
I'm not sure where this is gonna go, how it will change, but I've definitely felt this in my business overall. The more I listen to my own guidance, follow my own guidance, the more aligning it feels, and the more it resonates with people as well. Like when I share something that really comes from my heart, from my soul, that I feel inspired to post, then it tends to resonate with people much more. And also now I'm finding it in other areas of my business. For example, I was going to relaunch my program, and now it doesn't feel aligning to do a big launch, and
Mhm.
instead of just reaching out to, like, doing it the old way, to people who actually expressed interest, just reaching out to them and connected with
Mm.
them personally, one by one, and create these connections. And it feels so
Mm.
much more aligning for me, rather than posting random quotes or business
Yes.
advice or health advice or whatever. Just that doesn't resonate with people. And recently also one of my clients shared with me, because we chatted little bit about what we are up to before we started recording, and I shared with you I'm being guided to connect with more with the Czech community and do more business in Czech rather than English. And one of my clients shared with me, when I actually do share things in Czech rather than English, it resonates so much with her. Then even though she understands English, she was just, I feel like you're speaking directly to me. The energy is different. And so, yeah, listening to my own guidance, listening to my community, my audience, and feeling into what's aligning. And yeah, that
Yes.
tends to be the way for me, and I feel like it's the way for everyone else, because
Yes.
when we follow the guidance of other people, it can be helpful, but what worked for them doesn't have to work for us. And
That's right.
it can be like you said, we spend or I used to spend so much time and energy on social media trying to engage, trying to create as many posts every week, and do all these things. And you said it as well, it's not even our content, we don't own it, so we put so much time and energy into it. And then I've noticed, like, some people around me have lost their Instagram accounts, or they either got stolen or Instagram shut it down for some reason, and then you lose everything. And so many people rely on social media, as they some of them don't even have websites, and they just have their whole businesses on Instagram or wherever. And then what happens if you lose the account? Like, I'm sure like something can happen and you can lose your website as well, but it's, it doesn't feel aligning for me to do it this way. And I just, like I say, I share what feels aligning, and I try to follow my inner voice's guidance and just taking
That's
deep
a beautiful
breaths.
way. Yes, it comes back to that authenticity, doesn't it? That we value the authenticity, that it's important to do the things that are aligned for us.
Yeah. And sometimes it feels like too easy, like just take a deep breath, but it can be so profound to pause and take a breath or two or three, and we don't need fancy tools or anything. Sometimes it's really all it takes.
No, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know. I was going to ask you if you think it's possible to do business without social media, which you already answered. I mean, I feel it can be, as long as it feels aligning. What do you think? As long as it feels aligning and we set these boundaries you mentioned, then it can be a beautiful tool. But
totally. Yeah, it comes back to listening to your intuition, your inner voice, your own guidance, whatever you like to call it. Tune into what works for you. And if you are, yes, a business owner, you are the CEO of your own business. So you're the one that's making the decisions. Only you can know what's right for you. And so my decision to step away from social media is not necessarily the right decision for someone else. And that's okay. But just check in what's right for you, and what's going to sort of uplift or serve your business the best. And I always think as well of I can't remember what the principle's called, but it's that principle where you get 80% of the results from 20% of
the 80-20 rule. Yeah.
The 80-20 rule. Yes. And so when I broke things down and I looked at my business, and when most people were coming in, I was getting the most engagement through my podcast or my website or through my email list. And social media wasn't even scratching the surface. And I thought, well, why am I putting so much? It felt like I was putting so much more energy into social media when it was getting like no results, really, when I could be redirecting that energy into the things that are bringing me the results. So, yeah, just look at what's right for you. Where are you getting your results, and what lights you up?
Mm, yeah, I love that. I've got a few, let's say, rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
I know that you love reading, same as me. What are you reading right now?
Oh, good question. I've always got a few books on the go.
Mm,
So at the moment, I'm reading a novel called Honeybee by Craig Silvey, which is a novel, it's fiction. I've always
mm,
got a fiction and some sort of self-help or psychology book on the go. The other thing that I've been reading as well is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der
mm,
Kolk.
mm.
Have you heard of that book?
Yeah. That's a good
Yes,
one.
yes, yes. I'm always reading it in bite sizes. And there's something else that I'm reading. I'm just trying to remember what it is. Oh, yes, Thriving Mind. It's called Thriving Mind, and I can't think of the name of the author. But yes, 3 books on the
Mm.
go at the moment.
Yeah, I always read a few books at once.
Yes.
Yeah. What brings you most joy right now? What's really joyful for you at the moment?
Mm. It's the simple things that always bring me joy. It's nothing too crazy. So the things that bring me joy are, well, you would know, Pavlina, I moved from Melbourne, Australia to Brisbane. So I'm not
Mm,
sure if your listeners may or may not have visited Australia before, but Melbourne is very busy. It's very congested. It can be very cold. So I moved to an entirely different city where it's quite sunny most of the time. It's a slower pace of living. It's easy to access the beach. So being in nature, meaningful connection, um, coffee, getting good coffee,
mm,
cupcakes, what else? So yeah, just the simple things in life bring me so much joy.
Oh, it sounds perfect. What's your guilty pleasure?
Cupcakes would be one of them, absolutely. I'm very much, I think, being highly sensitive as well. I love to indulge the senses in some way. So I love food, and I need to be careful with my sweets, but cupcakes are a huge one for me. Other guilty pleasures. Oh, sometimes some trashy series on Netflix. So there's
Mm.
one that I just binged. I'm ashamed to say. So there's one.
We
There's one
all do
called.
it, Becky.
Oh, Byron Bays. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
I think I have actually. I haven't watched it, but I think I have. I'm actually just watching Australian Survivor. So
Ah, okay. Yes, I'm not much of a survival watcher, but I love the trashy dating
mm,
shows as well. Married at
oh yeah,
First
me
Sight, The
too.
Bachelor. Yes.
Me too. Yeah. So funny. Oh, what is I love to ask people or find out about people's morning practices. Do you have a morning practice, morning rituals, and would you mind sharing it with us?
Yes, I love morning rituals. It's my favorite time of the day. So my morning ritual, I try most of the time to get up before the sun comes up. From my balcony, you can sort of see the sunrise. I'm sorry, my cat is scratching in the background as well, so he
It's
often likes to
okay.
cameo. So yes, I like to get up in the morning, preferably just before sunrise. The sun does rise pretty early here in Queensland, which is nice. So I get the day started quite early. I like to either sit outside with a cup of tea, so brewing a nice cup of tea from tea leaves. I just
Mm,
find that ritual to be quite soothing. So rather than using tea bags, there's a beautiful brand here in Australia called T2. I've got a few different ones on the go. So this morning I had a creme brulee tea. That was beautiful.
ah,
Yeah. And I like to just sit in a bit of quiet because once the day gets started, there's not many opportunities for quiet. I'm often talking to people all day and coaching or, you know, doing things. So it's my time to just sort of sit and be. I might meditate, close my eyes. I like to connect with, I don't have a specific religion or anything like that, but I do like to connect with what people would call maybe universe or God or goddess, and really sort of just connect with my soul and check in with myself. I like to check in and just ask, oh, Becky, how are you feeling this morning? Because we'll go through our day and we'll ask everyone, how are you? How are you? How are you? And we sort of respond on autopilot, but I like to check in with myself and ask, how are you? And be honest. Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling lethargic? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling bored? Whatever it may be. After that, I like to just sit and journal. So I try to do at least 3 pages in my journal each morning. And sometimes insightful things will come up, and other times it's just boring, and I sort of think, oh, nothing's really come out of that, but it's just nice to unload my thoughts onto the page. And I always like to get some sort of movement in my morning as well. So depending, and I know that you do the same, Pavlina, sort of follow my menstrual cycle. So I'll go according to what my energy levels are doing. So when I'm in my inner summer, so around the sort of ovulation phase, I'll have more energy. So I'll do something like Pilates or strength or like a vinyasa yoga, or go for a run. When I'm starting to slow down a little bit, I might just go for a walk or do some gentle stretching. And then after that, prepare breakfast and good to go on with my day. That's sort of my morning in a nutshell.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I was wondering maybe or if there's anything that's coming through. I was going to ask about your favorite quote, but maybe is there anything your heart would like to share with the listeners? If there's anything coming through, we are on the Heart Connection podcast. Maybe, I would love to know. Is anything coming through from your heart right now?
What is coming through for me right now? I think, well, actually, because we are on the Heart Connection podcast, I really love the name of your podcast as well, Pavlina. I think it's beautiful. Yes, I think often the majority of us are living from our heads or our ego, which is okay. It's an important part of the way that we function, but we're not often tuning enough into the heart and what that's telling us. And interestingly, actually, the heart has a much bigger, what's it called, electromagnetic radius, I suppose, that stretches out much further than, say, what the brain does. And we forget that. And so often, and especially if you are highly sensitive, you can sort of get the vibe from someone else as to how they're feeling, what's in their heart, what type of person they may be. And often it's very much unconscious. So I think we need to be careful to take care. It might sound a bit corny, but take care of our hearts a little bit more and listen to what's in there and be guided by it a lot more as well. So the head is often telling us what we should be doing or what we've said, or we should have done something a bit better. But I like to also tune in and be like, well, what does my heart say about that as well? And it's always going to be something loving and wise, but we don't listen to it enough. So I love that. Yes, heart connection. I think living that heart connection, living through the heart each and every day is, where we can, is very important as well. That's sort of, that's what's come through for me anyway with that question.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. And where can people find you, Becky, when people want to connect with you? We know you're not on social media. Where else can people find you?
Yes, so the best place to find me is on my website, so www thegentlelivingnurse.com. Or I've got my podcast as well, so the Gentle Living Podcast. So definitely listeners should tune in and listen to your episode, that the conversation that we had a little while ago as well, Pavlina. And I've also got at the moment, I've just created a self-soothing guide for the highly sensitive person. So it's a little freebie just with an overview of how we can soothe ourselves and take care of our nervous system a little bit more as highly sensitive people. I can't remember what the link to that is, though. It'll be,
we can link it in the
I'll
show
give you the link.
notes.
Yeah. I'll give you the link, and that's another way to sort of have a little explore of my work and see whether it's sort of the right fit for you or whether it resonates for you as well. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Any last words of wisdom? Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered a lot, and I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast, Pavlina. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and it's been an honor to be invited as a guest. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming. It's been such a pleasure, such a joy to having you on. I always love connecting with you, and I'm so happy that we could share this conversation with the listeners. And yeah, sending you so much love. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful day. And may all the listeners have a wonderful day as well.